So having completed the user interface, now we need to do the script, which is going to, upon the user pressing the submit button, will gather the user's surname, first name, and also their flight options. Do they want refundable, direct and refundable, or neither? Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to write a script which is going to find that out, and then once that has been found out, we've got to kind of paste it to the next page, which will display it. Okay, so let's have a look inside the tutorial and show. This is the text. This is the form that the user puts in their details into, and underneath there is the subsequent page called useroptions.aspx, into which you say you are Borges, Jorge, again, and your options, direct flight only. Now the Borges and Jorge, that obviously comes directly from last name and first name, but this direct flights only comes from a deduction based on which of these checkboxes have been checked by the user. Okay, so let's first of all, let's create this useroptions.aspx page, and then think about how we get the data out of the text boxes and the checkboxes in order to fulfill them. So let's go to useroptions.aspx. Okay, and you will see what it looks like in the designer view. You've got essentially just two labels, personal details, which is the text, which will be the surname and the first name, and you've got another label which will be the flight options. Okay, so it's just basically two labels. So that's fairly simple, I think you'll agree with that. So let's go into our Visual Studio. Let's go into Solution Explorer. We're going to add a new item. It's going to be a web form, even though we're not going to really do anything with it. So it's going to call it useroptions.aspx. Okay, inside user options, as we said, the only thing that's there are two labels essentially. So let's bring up the toolbar, the toolbox, and let's just add. Let's go into the design view and then just add a label. Well, let's hang on a minute. Let's just remember: is there any text? No, there's not really. There's just two labels with a break between them. So let's just drag a label onto the screen. Okay, drag and return, and drag another label onto the screen. Okay, let's go into the source, and the first label, I think, let's check with the thing, is called personal details. So we'll copy that from the tutorial and we'll put it into the ID of the first label, and then we go back to the tutorial, and the second label is called flight options, which we will paste into the second label. Okay, so that's really all that is. We've set up our labels, and now we're going to need to write some code in flight options, which is the initial page. We're going to go back to it, and then we're going to have to write some code which will find out what the user has clicked. Okay, so if we go into flight options, and let's go to the top here first before we do anything. Let's just get rid of some of the stuff, the code behind stuff, because we're not really using code behind on this page. So we've just got a very simple kind of page directive at the top, and let's go instead, let's create a script area underneath the head. We type in script. Okay, so now what we need to do is produce a script which will be triggered by the thing. Sorry, I've done this wrong. I've put it into the wrong page. Let's go into flight options, click on source. Again, let's go up to the top, and there's our script area already set up. So let's now, in here, we need to write the code which will be triggered by the user pressing the submit button. So if I double click on the submit button inside the designer, what will happen is I'll get the stub of a function for listening to button clicks inside the script area of the page. Okay, so now submit click. What we're trying to do is we're trying to take these variables and put them onto another page. And what we're going to use this time to do it is a thing called session variables. Okay, now as you see, the first name and the last name session variables, those are extremely simple. All we've got to do is get the text out of the text boxes. Okay, the two text boxes here, last name and first name. Okay, so we just need to get the text out of there and put them into a variable, essentially into a session variable. Now if you go back into the tutorial and you look in some of the code at the very beginning, you'll see there session user first name, session user last name. That's some very simple 2 lines of code which will take the contents of the 2 text boxes in order to put them into session variables. So let's kind of just copy those, paste those in. Okay, so yeah, I think there was there's a slight typo in my, at least my version. Hopefully it's kind of changed by the time you're looking at it, but it should be saying, instead of saying user, it should be saying first name, not forename. Okay, first name dot text trim, and the last one should say last name dot text dot trim. Okay, so those are the 2 session variables which are very easy to obtain. The other session variables, however, require a little more sophistication, because we're not sort of just simply taking values. I mean, the values of direct flights, refundable flights can be true or false, but we have to turn that into some English descriptive phrase. So what I'm going to do now is kind of take the code. I'm just going to copy and paste it in, and then what I'll do is I'll explain it once I've actually copied and pasted it into the application. So if I copy and paste that now, okay, you'll see here. So if chb direct dot checked, okay, checked is the variable is true or false, whether a checkbox is been checked or not. So if direct flights has been checked and not refundable has been checked, okay, if not direct and not refundable, then no checkbox has been checked, and so therefore we have a third session variable called user options, saying no flight preferences at this point. Okay, and then we've got another statement: if direct is checked but refundable is not checked. Then we've got another if statement: if not direct is checked but refundable is checked. Okay, and then finally, if both checkboxes are checked, okay, we've got another direct and refundable flights. Now, I'll just explain what session variables are. You've seen what variables are in Visual Basic already. You know that a equals 20. Okay, so we now have a variable a. But when we say a variable a equals 20, that has a certain so-called scope. It only exists for either the function it's in or the page it is in, if it's a global variable. The difference between those and a session variable is that the session variable lasts for the duration of what is called the session. That is to say, the continuous use of this website by a user. So if a user is in the library and they're kind of clicking on this website, going from one page to another, they're regarded as being in the same session. Okay, but there will be something called a session timeout. So after about 20 minutes, if they've done nothing for 20 minutes, the website will assume then that that person is no longer looking, is no longer connected to the website. Okay, and so that session will effectively end. And should that person then try to log in again, typically what will happen is they will be directed back to the login page, saying, who are you, etc. Although we haven't yet progressed to the stage of using user logins at the moment. However, this is what a session variable is: a variable which has a scope of the entire session, okay, of one particular user using it. It's only shared by one user. It's only the one user who's using it at that moment, who goes from this page to that page to that page. It's not, you cannot share a variable between 2 users. Okay, a session is regarded as being one user at one site for a kind of determined period of time. Okay, so these are what session variables are. So once you've clicked on this submit button, okay, we've essentially filled these 3 session variables with some text based on either the text box or how they've clicked on the checkboxes. Okay, and then after having done that, we're going to send them off to useroptions.aspx. Okay, so useroptions.aspx is the other page we created. Now if we go into useroptions.aspx, here we are. What we're going to have to do though, those kind of session variables don't automatically go into the labels that we've created. So there are the labels that we've created on this page. Okay, those labels don't automatically get filled up with the data that we've passed over. That data we've passed over then has to be directed into those labels. So let's go into the source. Okay, and what we will do is on the page load, we will then specify that the content of those 3 session variables should go into those 2 labels. So let me just find the code which will be doing that inside user options. And here it is. If you go around quite near the bottom, you get here a page load function, which we can copy and paste into the script. Okay, and then you see here now we've got a text here. Personal details dot text equals UR and, which is the concatenation operator for strings, for bits of text inside quotes, and the kind of the underline, which means you can go on to a new line, session user last name, and comma, and an underline to make us go on to the next line, user first name. Okay, those are the name, remember, of the session variables we created on the previous page. Remember, there's a session variable, session user first name, session user last name. Okay, and in useroptions.aspx we're using those again, user last name, user first name. Okay, and there's user options. Okay, flight options.text equals your options and user options. So they're inside those 2 labels, personal details and flight options. So let's see now if all that works. So let's go to flight options, the first page, not this page itself. So click on flight options, press play, and we should go into the site. Okay, so here it is, first name Steve Bennett, and I'm going to have refundable flights, and I press submit, and what should happen is it goes to the next page, but something quite obviously hasn't worked because I've just got label and label appearing. So now I need to just check what's going on there. And in fact the answer is not too difficult. It's because we didn't put run at equals server in the script. So run at equals quote server, because if we don't have that, the page thinks it's JavaScript to be run in the client rather than or server side VB, which will be run on the server. Okay, so there's user options. Click on flight options. In there you see, notice script run at server is already correct. So now let's kind of stop it and start it again. We're in flight options. Let's see now if we can get this to work. Okay, so first name is Steve Bennett. Okay, and refundable, and if we go on to the next page, yes, you are Bennett, refundable flights only. Still not perfect here, and yes, because I was trying to debug it and I put in the wrong things while I broke up. So now I'll go into user options. I'll get rid of that response right hello, which I also use to debug, and now I shall finally get this thing to work, I hope. So if I click on flight options and I press play, and then this should appear in the browser. First name, I'll just type any old thing, last name any old thing, direct, press submit, and yes, that's now correct. It's now actually working well. So sorry about that, it took me a while to get it to work, but eventually it has worked, and I hope you understand therefore the system whereby we have managed to transfer session variables from the first page to the second, and this is a very important technique, especially when we're dealing with login. We won't be covering login until unit 7 of the course now, so you're going to be spared session variables for the next 4 units. but after that we're going to get into some really heavy stuff with logins and stuff like that. So it's worthwhile you understanding all of this. And anyway, so now we'll go on to the next unit.